Well, here we are. It is the 30th of December. And I was thinking yesterday when I mentioned the date, when when Joe Rayo said back in April that we've already through one third of the year. Well, somehow the other two-thirds have slipped their way through. So here we are, the day before New Year's Eve, and we've got quiet weather, but we've got another round of rain to deal with. And then, of course, guess what? It becomes January, and we're going to have January-like weather going forward. And it's complicated. And we are going to try to explain it, but you probably won't get much out of it tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And of course, you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast if you choose to do so. If you shop on Amazon, use our referral link pinned to the top of the chat board or on the descriptor to this podcast. Because if you do, whatever you buy, and Amazon sends us back a little bit of coin for sending you there, and it doesn't cost you one dime out of your pocket. So it's a simple click and shop, and you're finished. So we appreciate those of you who have used this referral link to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Okay, so I don't know how much you got to look at today. I saw a few things on some of the guidance that I don't think I've ever quite seen before, uh, which kind of like threw me for a loop. We those of you if you missed it last night, we had a great show with Dave Tolerus, and look, he may never get his diploma from charm school, and I get that, but he knows his stuff, okay? And one thing he said that rings so true is the fact that we're not going to get any clarity on any specifics with any of this, um, probably until within about 3 or 4 days of when whatever said event is going to happen. And nothing that I saw today changes that. All right. And I'm sure you're going to say the same thing.
Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to read something from our good friend on Facebook, and that is Bill Goodman, forecaster at the U.S. National Weather Service.
That old
And
fossil.
and
Actually, he's not the
and,
old fossil. He's the baby. But go on.
and he says after hearing about some folk on social media already proclaiming a slam dunk major snowstorm slash blizzard for our area sometime during the second week of January, I have to interrupt my chill time before starting a string of midnight shifts to offer a more reasonable take. Then he writes, it's way, and way is in all caps. It's way too early to make a call like that, and I won't get behind it. He said, what I will get behind is the idea of an extended period of cold beginning this coming Friday, then of snow somewhere across the mid-Atlantic and or Northeast around Monday the 6th. That's a week from now. Maybe also, again, closer to mid-month. The run-to-run trend for snow in New York City in both the European and GFS model ensembles during this time has been increasing, but this does not, again, all caps, this does not mean that we'll get the proverbial 2 feet of snow, but it does mean that our chances for snow in the long term are becoming very encouraging.
All
And
right.
what more can I
Well,
say?
you know what? That's a broad statement, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, you know, the it was really nice to see today a number of professionals step forward and say on social media and to basically, you know, point out the craziness that is out there, and that it's not going to stop. I mean, we could scream to the top of our lungs that it needs to stop. It's not going to stop. The only way that we win this battle is to convince enough people not to pay attention to them. Okay. And Joe, this is an ongoing problem. I sort of half kid around when I use the phrase forecast shopping, which is what a lot of people do. And then, of course, once they're done shopping, they come back to you and say, well, so and so said this. How come you're not saying the same thing? Okay.
Right,
So, but my
right.
point is, you have got people that are looking at this stuff and they have no idea what they're looking at. Okay. When they look at maps that are out 10, 11, 12, 15 days out into the future. My daughter messaged me today. There was one run of the European, I think it was Sunday morning's run, that gave a foot of snow to Atlanta and a foot and a half to me. And she was telling me today that it's all over the supermarket, that, there's this big snowstorm coming. I mean, this is what happens, though. This is what happens when you put, when people put out this stuff with which they really shouldn't be doing. I don't even want to say you got to put it out there with context. All right. Um, those of you who watch us, those of you who follow us on social media, look, when we're ready to commit to something, we'll commit to it. We can speculate all we want, but you know what? That's all it really is, because we're trying to figure out a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Okay, and I'm being generous by saying just 1,000, because it's probably more like a million-piece jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so when when a reputable forecaster gets to the point that they have gotten some sense of figuring out what exactly it's going to happen, then you can go to that person and you can just kind of see what they're saying, and make whatever decisions you need to make or not make, whatever it is. But you know please, please, please know you are getting your weather information from. Okay. If you're getting it from someone who is a high schooler, not professional, non-professional, whatever, you need to like go elsewhere. All right, that's just plain and simple. Because if you do, you will save yourself a lot of time, a lot of stress, and a lot of money. And it helps us because we're trying to just do things in a really logical, calm, correct manner. And that's my rant. I haven't ranted in a while because we haven't had a show in a while. So that's my rant for the day.
Okay, well, I would agree with you on every point that you just made. That unfortunately, in this era of social media, and you remember, Joe, when we got started, to get hold of any kind of a map or teletype information, unless you
Oh, it
had
was gold.
national service. I mean, it was gold. It's
If you
absolutely
had
right.
access to that stuff, it was gold.
And now, of course, anybody could just go online and pull out any number of maps and interpret it for themselves. But unless you're interpreting it correctly, unless you've done your homework, you could just go out and say, "Hey, there's going to be I just saw on the maps there's going to be a big snowstorm next Monday," and put it on Facebook, and immediately that starts going all over the place, as we
Right.
have
Yeah. Oh,
seen.
I
So,
know. Well, all the one of the remarkable things that I found today was this the incredible volatility that keeps going on from one to run. Oh, there's a blizzard on one run, it's completely gone on the next. It's a low moving across the northern Ohio Valley and into upstate New York on one run. Then it's moving across the lower Tennessee Valley and off the Carolina coast, and then out east northeast out to sea. And and this sort of back and forth, all has to do with how the upper air is changing. I honestly think if you want to look at something, let me just bring this up because I meant to bring this up yesterday and I completely forgot. But I think one of the major reasons why we're seeing the volatility in the model runs, I'm going to bring up, Joe, the Arctic Oscillation. Okay.
right.
The Arctic Oscillation chart from CPC. So this basically measures, this is a measure of pressure changes across the polar regions. When there's higher than normal pressures up there, the Arctic Oscillation Index goes negative. Well, it is it's forecast. It's forecast probably around just, let's say, January 6th or 7th or so, to be 4 standard deviations negative. Okay. And I mean, what this is really telling you is that there is this huge, huge atmospheric migraine, okay, that is going on. When you're four standard deviations from where you should be, we're talking about a very, very tiny, tiny percentage in terms of the number of times that we actually get to four standard deviations negative. A negative Arctic oscillation like this is being reflected by the models that are showing all this brutal cold air that eventually does come down into the United States. And I think because when the atmosphere gets out of whack like this, the models get equally out of whack. And that's what we're having to deal with here. And it may only get worse as the AO gets more and more negative in the coming days.
Yeah, if any of you out there were saying to yourself, especially, and if you take a look at the map that Joe has on the screen right now, I mean, look at the Arctic oscillation, Joe, as we move through the middle part of October. You remember that period in October when it felt like, oh my goodness, it was so warm outside. We had a long stretch from mid-October right on into a good part of November where it felt like winter was nowhere on the horizon. And people are saying, oh no, it's going to be another one of those winters. Well, guess what, folks? It ain't going to be one of those winters because, again, the fact that we had all that bitterly cold weather. Joe, Renan and I were out for a couple hours today in Mailpack doing a little bit of shopping and looking around. And there was one point where I ran into a store with her and I didn't have my sweatshirt on. I had short sleeves on. And as I'm running out in 55 some odd degree weather, the sun was out, 55 was nice and mild. I'm saying to myself, a week ago, I would have been crazy to do this because a week ago, we were having trouble getting temperatures out of the single digits. And here we are a week later, boom, we're back up to mild temperatures. Well, guess what? As quickly as that changed toward mild weather, as quickly as that happened, by this time next week, we're going to be, as you just saw with the Arctic oscillation taking a nosedive, we're going to be in the throes of a long term stretch of cold weather. Now, the interesting thing to me is that it's not going to be the Northeast or the Mid Atlantic, but it looks like this surge of exceedingly cold weather or unusually cold, unreasonable cold weather is going to be concentrating mostly on the Southeast. In fact, Joe,
That's me.
The Climate Prediction Center had the bullseye of the coldest weather right over your house for the period,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, 8 to 14-day outlook. I'll bring it up if you want to give me sharing capabilities, and you can
I
take a
already
look at it.
did.
Very good. Well, I'll bring it up as soon as my fat little fingers can get to it. But yeah,
Okay, you could just want to Jess Harden, Fox 6 out of Birmingham is set to say he showed the Euro models calling for snow January 10th timeframe. Lock it in, lock it in, because the European is now, 12 days out into the future's got snow. It's practically gospel. I mean, I just finished saying that none of this stuff matters in the long range as far as the specifics are concerned because it's too volatile. That's why the runs are changing as wildly as they are. Even in the mid range, they're changing wildly as they are. So you got to just kind of grasp this and say, I'm not going to waste my energy on something 12 days from now that has a high probability of not happening. So, just put some context here. Go ahead, Joe.
well, absolutely. And we spent a long time talking about this last night. But on the screen right now is the climate. Now, the thing about, you say, hey,
Yeah,
Rayo, you said last night, don't go much beyond 5 days on the forecast. And you're showing an 8 to 14-day map. What I'm showing to you is not something that's going to go specifically for a storm or a specific weather event. This is a probability outlook.
you're,
8 to
you're
14
showing
days
you're
temperature.
showing you're showing trend, not specific.
Correct.
Trend,
Correct.
there is forecast skill out to about 10 days or a little or longer when it comes to forecasting a broad trend. That's what this map is. It's a broad trend. There is nothing really specific. You're not going to point to a small town in Kentucky and know exactly what the weather is going to be like any time any given time in that 8 to 14 day period, but you know that the general trend will be that it's going to be below normal temperatures.
And this is really, you talk about trends. Take a look at this area right. I'm gonna highlight it right here. Look at that. Now, what that is, according to the legend, is the 90 to 100%. That's as high up as you can possibly go on this chart. 90 to 100% probability of below normal temperatures. So that means, Joe, that you and adjacent Alabama, Tennessee, western sections of North Carolina and South Carolina, all the way up into a good part of Kentucky, extreme western sections of Virginia. My goodness, this signals maybe a stretch of uh, near record low temperatures in the early morning
Well,
hours.
the all-time record low at Brasstown Bald, which is 10 minutes from my house, is 27 degrees below zero. I don't know that I want to get. I don't necessarily know. I want to see that particular record broken.
Well,
And usually Brasstown runs about 5 to 7, maybe 5 or 6. I run about 5 degrees colder than downtown Blairsville, and Brasstown runs about 5 to 7 degrees colder than me because they're another 2,600 feet higher.
I I'd like to know if when that record was set, if Brasstown Bald had any kind of significant snow cover, because that
Yeah,
certainly.
you know what? That's a good question. Their average snowfall up on that mountain peak is actually quite similar to whatever the normals are for central Massachusetts. So it's up there at about 35 to 40 inches for a
Yeah.
season. So it's quite possible. I mean, I went up there the day after Thanksgiving and everything was ice covered.
Well, I'll tell you, maybe we're not going to get down to the record temperature, but I will say this: that during this time frame, and what is the time frame again? This is for January 7th to the 13th. So we're talking about the time frame from a week from Wednesday. Let's see, January 7th. That's 7 days. That's well, this is 8 to 14 day outlook. So yeah, so from Tuesday, yeah, Tuesday the 7th through the 13th. I mean, we're talking about temperatures that are going to be very, very cold. And as I mentioned last night, it has been a while, a long time actually, in my mind, that we have had a situation where the folks in Florida, the Florida Peninsula, look at the Florida Peninsula. I mean, we're talking about here 80 to 90% probability of below normal temperatures across about 75% of the state. And down here, south of Lake Okeechobee, the number goes down, if you can call it going down, to only 70 to 80% probability. This wave of cold is going to threaten the citrus crop down there, and I don't think it's been quite some time since that has happened. That they've had, and notice if you will that while it is going to be cold most everywhere east of the Mississippi, that again the coldest temperatures being projected here are in the central and southern plains and deep south. Here in the northeast, New York and points north and east, it's cold. In fact, up here in northern Maine, it's only leaning toward below, only
Right.
about 33 to forty
Well,
percent.
seasonally adjusted, there are no winters in Maine because it's always cold in the wintertime there. So it's not exactly breaking news.
And I was pointing out to Renata, as we were driving home from our little trek into Mailpack today, and she said, "It's going to get cold, right?" I said, "Yeah, it's going to get cold." I said, but it will not get as cold or as bitterly frigid as it was a week ago up here in the tri state area because while this cold air is going to be coming from Canada, the upper level winds are going to be mostly out of a west northwest or northwesterly direction. Our frigidly cold weather, the coldest we see, as we've pointed out on more than a few occasions, come when we get that wind straight down from the north. This doesn't look like we're going to be getting a straight northerly cold airflow. It will get cold, no question about it.
Right.
Compared to
But
what we had today.
the brutal air is going to be Ohio Valley, probably Ohio Valley, the central and southern Appalachians, down into the southeast and into Florida. Yeah, I mean that's where you're going to see the biggest anomalies.
And also now the 8 to 14 day outlook for precipitation. Now, for all of this talk about, you know, potential big snowfall, January 6th, I think, is the date that everybody's honing in on, or maybe a day or two beyond that. Or take a look. While all of the East is underneath exceedingly cold weather, what we have here is near normal precipitation up across the Northeast, and actually slightly below normal from New York all the way down to southern Georgia. The only place where it's above normal is here across Florida. Now, I'm not going to say that with that unseasonably cold weather plus above normal precipitation, there's going to be snow. Well, maybe there might be. I don't know.
Right. And you
Flurries?
know what? And that's going to be that's the short range problem when we get into that particular short range.
Right, right. I don't want anybody to say now or post on their Facebook page, hey, you know, Joe Ray was hinting that Florida was going to get snow next week. No, Joe Ray was not saying that. Joe Ray was simply saying that while it is going to be, according to the Climate Prediction Center, unseasonably cold across much of the East, that the only place in the East that has above normal or slightly above normal precipitation probabilities would be a good part of the Florida Peninsula. So who knows? Maybe it'll be a chilly rain
Right.
that'll be occurring next week. But in any case, you could see, you get the idea that it looks like it's going to be a cold stretch of weather beginning about the 7th of January.
All right, let's see what's going on weather-wise right now, and then we can take a look at some guidance to see where who knows where it's going to be taking us. But we've got winter storm watches up for north central and northeastern New York, as well as southwestern New York, northwestern Pennsylvania, and northeast Ohio, because for the umpteenth time since Thanksgiving, they're going to have lake effect snow up there, and it could be substantial. We've got some dense fog issues tonight again in Minnesota, Wisconsin. Winter weather advisories in parts of South Dakota into northeast and north central Nebraska. Also, a scattering of winter weather advisories from northeastern Wyoming, even a couple of counties with winter storm warnings, and also in central Montana and in western Montana. But it's not as widespread as what we saw yesterday, and much of the weather out in the western part of the U.S. is on the quiet side. So here's what it looks like on the loop. We had that cold front come through last night, brought another decent shot of rain, which continues to whittle away at the drought, whatever's left of it. Sure, some places still have some, but I'm sure now other places do not. But we'll check on Thursday when the new drought map comes out. So we're kind of in a quiet zone for now, but you can see the blob of clouds in Iowa and into South Dakota and Nebraska. This is the next low that's moving eastward, and then it'll turn northeast. And eventually, it's going to bring in another round of rain for New Year's Eve across parts of the northern mid Atlantic to New England Tuesday night. And it may start ending during the early morning hours from west to east as the low goes by and everything starts to lift on up to the north. And we're still seeing more energy that's coming into parts of the Northwest, but it's nothing, there's nothing here that's anything I would call impressive. Radars tonight, we do have some snow going on well up to the north in the St. Lawrence Valley. Also, we've got precipitation back through Illinois and Iowa and through parts of Missouri. A little bit of colder air that's back through Nebraska and South Dakota, where we have the winter weather advisories. That's snow there. And you can see there's some patchy areas in parts of Montana and Wyoming, and a little bit of rain and some mountain snow up in Washington State. We don't have any severe weather issues over the next 3 days, so we'll take a look at what WPC is forecasting in terms of precip. Half to three quarters of an inch for the next 7 days. So some of this actually goes into Monday night, so of next week, and there might be a weather system to deal with on Monday. But so that's part of that half to three quarters. You see that purple area in north central New York, that's from lake effect, and we're talking about an inch and a half of liquid or more. In the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, down into the lower Mississippi Valley, it looks like anywhere from three quarters of an inch to as much as an inch and a half plus, and that extends up to the northern reaches into Illinois and Indiana and Ohio. And of course, in the Northwest, you've got some heavier precip in parts of the northern Rockies, as well as through Washington and Oregon. So I want to bring up this, Joe, the GFS 500 millibar from the 12Z run today. As I said earlier today, you don't you this is something you really don't see, if at all, in a lifetime. Although I do remember I think it was 1980 or one of those in the early 80s, where there was a bitter cold stretch of weather where the polar vortex, you had like a 498 vortex drop all the way down to Texas. I mean, the whole atmosphere was in absolute chaos in that particular January. Well, just looking at what's going on here, here's our shortwave for tomorrow night, and that just sort of plays through. And once that goes by, then we're going to begin this sort of stair step decline on the temperatures because the ridge is going to be building out in the west. You got this northwest flow from Canada. You've got um, a displaced Atlantic jet very far to the south, a low near Newfoundland, the so-called 50-50 low, getting ready to take over there. And so now we're going to start to see these colder air masses moving in. And this is when I saw this, it was a little bit of a jaw drop moment. So here's Monday's system that goes by. And take a look up north of Minnesota. You're going to see a very, very cold and powerful vortex. Now, normally these vortexes are in Canada. Sometimes they'll get down to maybe Lake Superior, in that latitude. But seldom do they drop down like this one did, Joe. It dropped down through Michigan and into northern Virginia. That is a 492 height line. So, you want to just extrapolate a little bit. There's a 489 upper low forecast by the GFS into northern Virginia. And this type of upper air like this has all sorts of implications regarding storm development on the east side of it, and of course, the really bitter cold air goes down into the southeast and into Florida in something like this. But this is really anomalous. I mean, I could only think of that one time where I remember seeing it on a map to see an upper low that strong come down into the mid latitudes like this.
Are you making an allusion to something that happened in 1978?
No, well, not necessarily, but look, I'm going to tell you right now, this was the 12Z run, okay? This was the
Right,
12Z run. It wasn't
right.
on the 6Z. It wasn't on the 0Z last night. And guess what? On the 18Z today, when you pull it up, it's not there. It's a whole different upper air setup. So this is what I'm talking about here, where we've got these models spitting out major storms on one run and then nothing on the next. There's no sense of consistency because the model, the atmosphere is in chaos here with this AO being going to four standard deviations negative. And I just think that you're going to continue to see, over the next 3 or 4 days. Then let's talk about the system for Monday because that'll be the next one that'll be in play here. And I'll back this up. So depending on what you look at and what run you look at, well, here's our Wednesday system that goes by and it turns colder. Okay. And then you've got some troughing that moves through on Friday that brings in maybe a colder shot of air for Friday to set it up for Saturday and Sunday. And then you have low pressure that on this run comes out of Texas and Oklahoma, runs up into the Ohio, on the GFS anyway. Part of it goes up in the Ohio Valley, part of it splits and goes off the southeast coast, and then moves out offshore with a developing surface low off the Delaware coast, and it goes out. It doesn't really, the GFS really didn't produce very much, excuse me, in terms of snow. On the other hand, you go to the European. The European takes this low, and this is what David Tolerus was talking about last night. Based on what you're looking at in the overall upper air, a solution that takes a surface low straight east and off the mid-Atlantic coast makes a lot more sense than trying to take a low that goes up toward up to northern Ohio or western New York. But this is again run to run consistency. It's there, it's not there. And you get no help from the ensembles, though, because the ensembles are all over the place. I don't know what to make of this for Sunday night and Monday. Honestly, I don't. I mean, if European is right, this could be a two to four, 3 to 6 inch snowfall for Monday. But
Well, it's like what I said last night. I said that the overall pattern to me looked like Alberta Clippers traveling along the periphery, the outer periphery of the cold air, swinging on down from, let's say, Minnesota or Wisconsin, and being forced to go well south of the tri-state area because the cold it cannot penetrate. It cannot buck the very cold air that is
right.
in place over the Northeast. So the only thing it could do is it goes south of us. It reaches the mid-Atlantic coast, and then what happens? It gets its feet wet, interacts maybe with the Gulf Stream, it intensifies rapidly, and yeah, you get a quickie 2 to 4, 3 to 5, 4 to 8 inch snowfall. That could very well happen on more than a couple of occasions during this upcoming month because of this very cold weather pattern.
Right.
I kind of reminds me, it kind of reminds me in a way of the winter of 76, 77. We had a lot of clippers that winter, and it was also a very cold winter. So maybe we're about to see something similar to that.
And the
Replicate
one,
that.
as I remember, there was one coastal storm that year that wound early in January that wound up being a coast hugger, and it turned to rain along the coast. And the rest were these small systems that moved on through from time to time. And maybe Joe, that's what it's going to be. Maybe that is what it's going to be because you've got so much cold air. It's just so overwhelming. How much room is there for you know something to come out of the Gulf states or something to come up the East Coast? I don't know that you're going to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's going to be difficult. But again, and it's so different from what we've had for the last 2 or 3 winters, where we have lacked much in the way of cold air. Now that there seems to be too much cold air. And remember, I remember what you said, Joe, at the very beginning of this winter season. Watch out for what you hope for, because even though you may have all the cold air, sometimes that cold air can work against you by pushing all of the potential snowmaking storm systems off to the south.
Look at the blocking. I mean, we've got enormous blocking over Greenland and in the Davis Strait. That is when you see purple on these 500 millibar charts, up that far north. I mean, we really are looking at a very um, cold setup, but the blocking is almost too strong, and it's a problem because yeah, everything gets shifted to the south. It may wind up being very good for snow lovers in Virginia and North Carolina and Tennessee and Kentucky, Arkansas. Yes, Jess, maybe even in northern Alabama. I threw that in just for you.
Yeah, I could remember at least a couple of cases, one in 1973 and again in 1980. And I would DX. DX is a term where at night radio waves travel much further than they do during the day. And I used to listen to WBT out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I remember in 1980, they got dumped on. They had like 20 inches of snow. Meanwhile, I'm sitting up here in New York and the skies are like partly cloudy and it's cold. I mean, it's nothing. I said, like, how could this be? How could this be? Well, that's the way sometimes the game plays. That you get too much cold air up here, and all the good stuff, if you're a snow lover, ends up to the south. Not saying that that's going to happen in the coming weeks, but just want to point that out that is always a possibility.
Right. And by the way, I also want to just kind of just to for play out both sides of the equation. Uh, the state of the atmosphere is is chaotic. The dynamics are in some cases insane. So I couldn't say that something would that I could see how something of something major may come together somewhere along the line, but I'm not going to say it based on one run of any specific model. Out in the long range, it's certainly not now.
We hit
But
100.
look, if you're going to get a big snowstorm, yeah, and you need to have a ton of cold air and really good upper air dynamics, and you've got both those things. Now it's going to be a question of whether how they come together and where they come together, and that's the big forecast problem. It is not going to get resolved here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast tonight.
No, it will not.
No. Since we can't resolve that tonight. Um, let's see.
I
So
did ring.
it's
Everybody's saying ring the bell. I rang the bell. I'll ring it again. I'll ring it again. Second time.
yes. So since we can't resolve that, let's do Briller Jeopardy. And Scott Briller sent this along. It's New Year's Eve weather in New York City. So we'll start with the coldest New Year's Eve in New York City when the ball dropped. The temperature when the ball dropped.
I just happened to look at that yesterday, I think. 1917, I think, was one below zero.
You're close on both the year and the temperature.
Oh, okay. Well, then if it was not 17, it had to be 18.
It was 18, and the temperature when the ball dropped.
Was something like what? One degree above
Frank
zero?
R gets it 1 degree above zero when the ball dropped.
Yeah.
It got down, I think, below zero for the morning low on New Year's Day.
And in
Um,
2017 was the second coldest. That was
2018,
it was 9 degrees.
right?
Yeah.
He's got 2018 here. So I don't know if he meant 17 going into 18 or 18 going into 19. Either way, it was 9 degrees. What was the warmest ball drop? And there's he's got two, two of them here. They're not tied. So he's got the two warmest ball drop temperatures.
Um, Somehow or other, the year 1965 pops up in my head, and that's
Well,
like
65 is not on the list, but
really
Jason Schaefer already hit one of those numbers, 58, 58. And waiting to see if anybody gets the second number. And Northern Grace gets the second number, Joe, 55. The 58 was in 1973. The 55 was in 1993. Now, the most snow to fall on New Year's Day in New York City?
it had to happen before 1956, before I was born, because I can. Oh, wait a minute, hold on for a second. New Year's Day, New Year's Day. All right, I'm thinking about the moment of the ball drop or whatever, but I think it was 1971.
Well, give yourself a bell ring. 1971 it was. And that, by
Right.
the way, that was the second. The 1971 snowfall was the second snowiest New Year's Day.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that was the one where it started flurrying right after the ball dropped, and when I woke up the next morning, I was living in the Bronx then, the Bronx Neck. We had like 6 or 7 inches of snow.
I was
So
living there. I was living there too. Six. Those of you who put 6 or 7 inches for 1971, that it was 6.8. Right. Let me move my cursor here. I'm sorry, 6.4. Um, and in 1869, Joe, 9 inches in 1869. Now, I
wow,
don't expect you to remember that. Okay.
that was even before the ball started to drop.
If it was 1870, then I'd say yes, he should have remembered that.
Yeah.
The coldest New Year's Day.
Well, wouldn't that have to be the same year with the coldest ball? If it was 1 degree above zero in 1918 at ball drop time, I'm sure that New Year's Day itself was probably, well, the colder. There was below zero,
Right.
-1, -2, whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
it got to -4. that morning in
Brr.
1918, -4. And the second coldest was 2018, 7 above. 7 above.
Yeah, yeah. So that was so that is when I made that a comment earlier about the second coldest New Year's ball drop or whatever. I guess it was 2018 and not 2017.
Right. All right. I think that pretty much sums it up. I mean, there's really not much more than we can add that hasn't been added by countless Facebook pages over the course of the last 24 hours, given that there's plenty of maps to pull with plenty of snow amounts if you want to, if you really want to. Pay no
And
attention to them,
and
please.
may I point something out on the chat board to Ruben. Winter is always 2 weeks away. Fairchild, who says, "Who is this Lyndon of Lindenhurst? Is he a weatherman?" And I will point out to you, Mr. Fairchild, that Leon of Lindenhurst probably knows quite a bit more about weather and weather patterns and has been looking at all kinds of meteorological indications well before you, I think, landed on this planet. He is a very assiduous weather observer, weather watcher, and he knows a lot about weather. That's who Leon of Lindenhurst happens to be. If Joe would like to add something to that, go right ahead, Joe.
Oh, Leon's an avid weather enthusiast, and he's been around for a long time. I know him going back quite a few years. I don't know why you feel the need, Ruben, to even to ask that question. But indeed, you have asked it, so I guess I don't know. It's why is it important to you? Why do you need to know?
I should also point out that Leon of Lindenhurst hit the tip jar tonight, and
Oh,
thank you
we
very much
did.
for that,
Okay,
Leon.
thank you, Leon. By the way, I'm just kind of looking, at the drought map here, Joe. So just real quick, this is as of last Thursday, so it doesn't count anything that's fallen over the weekend. And so anyway, let me just bring this up. I don't know how, so they still have moderate drought for the Hudson Valley, much of Connecticut, um, central and eastern Long Island. Areas around New York City are still under what they call a D2 severe drought. And southern New Jersey, south of 195, they are in extreme drought. That has not changed much at all. So I'm surprised with all the rain that's fallen since Thanksgiving that this hasn't, been alleviated to an extent. I would have thought that it would have come down more than it has. But you know what?
But it is
I don't know
coming
how they
down.
measure this stuff.
Yeah, but it is coming down. I mean,
Oh
it may
yeah.
not come down as rapidly as what you and I and everybody else wanted to see, but it is coming down, and it will continue to come down because, as you pointed out, we picked up over the weekend, depending upon where you were, anywhere between a half to one, and even in some cases, maybe up to an inch and a half of rain. So that certainly will help to, again, bring down those colors even more in the next drought report, which will be made tomorrow, actually, but will not be posted until the second day of the new year on Thursday.
All right. All right, folks. So hey, we'll be back tomorrow. I doubt we're going to have more clarity tomorrow than we had today. Maybe we'll have a little bit more clarity with system for Monday, just a little bit. But as far as the rest of the longer term, I doubt it. But we'll see. And we'll be here at 7:35. Just a heads up for New Year's Day. We will have a show New Year's Day, but it will probably, it more than likely will be an 8:30 start. Okay, so just to let you know. So we'll be here tomorrow night, New Year's Eve. Joe, you may be at a party, but you're gonna, help us out,
Yes,
right?
tomorrow night they're going to have an informal New Year's Eve get together at the German American Club here in Putnam Valley. And Renata, of course, is a very important person there.
Oh,
She's
I mean, she's the big cheese there, right?
she's not the big cheese, but she is a fairly large piece of cheese.
Oh, okay. So she's not Limburger, she's Roquefort.
Yeah. Well, in any case, she has indicated that we are going to be there tomorrow night, not all the way up till midnight, but for a couple of hours, a few hours. So, if that be the case, if I end up there, I think I'll bring along the laptop, and I actually may do the show tomorrow with you from the German American. Maybe there might be a few people who'd be interested in coming on and saying hello. We'll
All right.
see. Have a little fun on the final night of the year 2024.
Christinapedia suggests that maybe Renata's the Grand Poobah.
Well, no, actually, the Grand Poobah is a gentleman by a very nice gentleman by the name of Jerry Schrammick,
All right.
but she is
So wait,
certain.
the what show was the Grand Poobah? Was that the Honeymooners?
No, I think that was the Flintstones.
Oh, okay. So who had the Grand High Exalted
Look at
Mystic
Mystic
Ruler?
Ruler.
Who was
Yeah,
that? What show was
that was
that?
more. That was Morris Fink.
Yeah, but what show was that?
The Honeymooners.
Well, that was the Honeymooners. Was
Yes,
the Grand High Exalted Mystic Ruler?
right. And
Oh,
if you remember that particular episode, he was the only one, the only raccoon who had more than one raccoon tail on his hat.
right, that's correct. Then you only have one tail on your hat. He probably went to get his raccoon hat that I gave him for Christmas.
There it is. Whoops. There you go.
I dare you to wear that tomorrow night.
Hey, I might just do that. You
You
know,
know,
I'll give
maybe it's
everybody there a friendly raccoon hello.
exactly.
Woo!
All right,
Woo!
everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you all tomorrow night. Happy for a happy New Year's Eve. Night night.
Good night.